My father crushed my dreams to protect his golden child and refused to pay for my education, but later I got my sweet revenge. I'm a 32-year-old man, and my younger brother is 28. We grew up with our father, who is now 56, starting from middle school. My father always favored my brother, and over time, I got used to it. I was never the son my father wanted because, unlike him and my brother, I wasn't into sports or typically masculine activities. I was always more interested in things usually considered feminine. Essentially, as a child, I was a little boy who loved everything related to cooking, reading, and even singing. My father tried to get me to play football with him, but I couldn't do it, and gradually we drifted apart. My brother, on the other hand, was exactly the son my father wanted. He was strong and fearless, not afraid to get dirty or even get hurt. He was the perfect son for my father, and it was obvious that Dad loved my brother much more than me. He always spoke about him with admiration, while I never heard anything like that about myself. My mother, however, treated us equally and was fair to both of us, which is why I loved her so much. I really tried to build a relationship with my father and spend time with him, but after we drifted apart, he showed no interest in repairing it. Unfortunately, the glue that held our broken family together, my mother, passed away. When I was in 8th grade, she had cancer. By the time we discovered it, it was already too late, and she was gone. Her death literally destroyed me, and at that time, I was a bit lost. The only comfort I had was the kitchen, and I cooked something new every day as if my life depended on it. My mother was a wonderful cook, and she often told me that if she hadn't been forced to take over her father's business, she probably would have become a chef. So cooking was the only thing that brought me comfort since my father and brother didn't help me deal with my emotions. They suppressed all their reactions to our mother's death and, if anything, grew even more distant from me, whereas in normal families, such tragedies usually bring people closer together. My passion for cooking really angered my father, and he constantly pressured me to get out of the kitchen and do something more manly. One day, when his patience ran out, he said that if he saw me in the kitchen again, he would make me do all the household chores. He told me to be more like my brother and man up, which ended in a huge argument where I said he never loved me, and he agreed. Everything finally came out into the open. Essentially, that was the last time my father and I had such an open conversation because after that, I completely stopped trying to win his approval, and he showed no interest either. For the next few years, I spent all my time in my room, listening to music and learning new recipes, determined to make a career as a chef, not just for myself but for my mother. In the meantime, I only communicated with my father out of necessity. My brother also barely paid attention to me and ignored me like Dad. After my mother died, I essentially had no one to rely on. Finally, when it was time to apply to college, I decided to submit applications to several of the best culinary schools, as well as a regular college. I didn't know if my father would agree, but at least I had to try. That summer, I secretly interned at a restaurant to gain experience and secure a recommendation letter, which helped me a lot. Eventually, I was accepted into several schools, including one of the best in France. I was thrilled, but also nervous because I had to ask my father for permission to go. I was ready to beg if he hesitated, because I could not allow myself to give up my dream under any circumstances. I told my father everything, expecting him to refuse and say it wasn't a manly profession, but I was completely unprepared for him to refuse to pay for my education entirely. I still remember being shocked when he said he wouldn't pay at all. My father was far from poor, he had more than enough money to send me to France. It wasn't about money. The reason was that if I went to France and enrolled in such a prestigious school, it would make my younger brother feel insecure. He had already struggled with school and couldn't get himself together, so my father wanted me to either attend a local college or figure out how to pay for my education myself. I was stunned that my father could be so cruel to his own son and didn't know what to say. I tried to explain how important it was to me, but he was firm and refused, saying my brother's well-being was his top priority and that he didn't want me to compete with him. I couldn't believe it was happening. I couldn't imagine any father in the world destroying his child's dreams for a favorite. After long arguments and tears, when he still refused to budge, I had a huge fight, said a lot of harsh words, and left his house for good. I went to live with my maternal aunt, my mother's older sister. The only reason I hadn't moved earlier was that I found comfort in the house where I grew up with my mother and didn't want to change schools. I told my aunt about everything, how my father refused to pay for my education, and asked for her help. It was awful to ask for such a large sum because she wasn't as wealthy as my father, but she assured me she would cover all my expenses. Somehow, she managed to arrange it with friends, and together they helped send me to the culinary school of my dreams, for which I will always be grateful. Once I got there, I worked part-time and tried to use all my time to justify the money being spent on me. I worked very hard and gradually advanced. When I graduated, I was one of the most talented chefs in the school and found a job just a few months after graduating. I got a position in a very prestigious French restaurant and sent half my salary to my aunt to gradually repay the debt. I was lucky I didn't take a student loan, otherwise, I might never have been able to repay it. I worked in France for several years, then saved enough money to open my own restaurant. I returned home and worked as a chef in another restaurant for a few years, while striving toward my goal of opening my own place. Everything was finalized a few weeks ago, and I finally opened the restaurant I had been working toward for so long. 2 friends I met in France joined my business as co-owners. I was very happy when they let me choose the name of the restaurant. Since we were all from the same state, we agreed to open the restaurant in my chosen city. I decided to name it after my mother, which turned out to be perfect because she had a beautiful and rare name in our city. Everything finally fell into place. A few days ago, we held a small party for select guests before the official opening. Of course, I invited my aunt and a few of her friends who helped pay for my education. I also invited a couple of school friends, but that was it. I didn't invite my father or brother for obvious reasons. Even if I had wanted to, I couldn't, because I hadn't spoken to them since I left home, and they never tried to contact me. I think it was for the best, but I expected they would show up anyway to claim some credit for my success, and that's exactly what happened. They arrived an hour before the party started. Security didn't stop them because we share the same last name, and they claimed they came to surprise me. At least it was partially true. I was definitely surprised when I saw them. My father and brother greeted me as if nothing bad had ever happened and were incredibly friendly toward me. Probably for the first time in my life, I froze when they entered the restaurant. My friends noticed something was off and politely greeted my relatives, leaving us alone. I was grateful to them for sensing my discomfort. I was still in shock when they presented me with a gift, a portrait of my mother. My father even said he had it specially commissioned for me to hang in my restaurant. He had heard that a new fancy restaurant had opened with her name and immediately realized it was mine. He even added that he always knew I had talent. My brother also joined in the praise, saying he was insanely proud of me. I couldn't believe my ears and immediately knew something was up. I stayed silent, waiting for them to get to the point because I knew they had a reason for this visit. Finally, they revealed their purpose. It turned out my brother now works as a bartender, thanks only to my father convincing a friend to hire him. His grades had consistently dropped throughout school and college, so he never got the high-paying job my father had hoped for. He also became lazy during school football matches, which meant he couldn't get a sports scholarship. Ironically, he ended up in the community college that hardly anyone aims for because no one else would take him. They wanted me to make my brother a partner in the business to give him a more respectable position, even though he had done absolutely nothing for it. I barely held back laughter, somehow composed myself, and told them I would think about it. Of course, I wasn't going to think about it. I just didn't want to refuse them immediately. I wanted them to stay at the party because I had a better plan to humiliate my father, who had surfaced as soon as he heard about my success. They seemed pleased, but oh boy, they had no idea what was coming. After a while, guests began arriving, and an hour later, everyone was in the restaurant. I spent the evening talking with guests. My father and brother wandered around, chatting, and I even heard them bragging about me to some of the guests. I was amazed at their audacity. Towards the end of the evening, it was time for the host's toast, me and my partners. My friends went first because I wanted to save the sweetest for last. Finally, it was my turn. That day, I decided to speak everything that had built up inside me. I started by thanking all my guests and raising a glass to my mother, because thanks to her, I achieved so much. I always believed her faith in me from childhood gave me confidence, and that feeling stayed even after she was gone. After honoring her, I turned to the part where I needed to address my father and brother. I mentioned that I had to borrow money from my aunt and her friends to attend culinary school and thanked them for their help. Finally, I got to the point. Why did I have to take a loan for my education? It was because of my family. I told everyone how I grew up with a father who never loved me, didn't believe in me, and constantly scolded me for having feminine interests like cooking, while my younger brother was a copy of my father. I explained how my father refused to pay for my education out of fear I would surpass his favorite child, my younger brother, which is why I left home. Despite all the hardships, I managed to rise and become who I am today. In a way, they deserve some credit for the obstacles I had to overcome, otherwise, I would never have realized my own strength. Many guests shot my father and brother angry looks, the kind only possible when people are truly furious, and even they had enough sense to at least pretend to feel embarrassed. Though I knew they didn't. Nevertheless, I approached my father and brother and hugged them, mimicking the scene they had performed when they arrived. Why not? Two can play that game. I announced that since they came to celebrate my success, I forgave them for everything that happened in the past and even offered my brother a bartending position in my restaurant. To everyone else, it seemed like a heartfelt reconciliation, and at the end of my speech, people even began applauding. Some even whistled. Only my family knew it was just a way to humiliate them, and I succeeded, but they had to smile and pretend to be grateful for my offer, as they couldn't leave in anger, though that was exactly what they wanted. Later, when the guests left and it was time to go home, my father and brother approached me outside the restaurant. They were furious, and I swear I saw angry tears in my brother's eyes. They demanded an explanation for what I had done, saying that if I wasn't going to make my brother a partner, I could have just kicked them out immediately. I laughed and said this was my way of repaying them for everything they had done to me over the years, and that it was exactly what they deserved. Then I turned and left without looking back, even when I heard my brother shouting that this was the cruelest thing anyone had ever done to him and that I would regret it. I didn't care because I was already getting in my car and leaving. This happened a few days ago, and I haven't heard from them since. My aunt thinks I might have gone too far and that I should have just kicked them out from the start, but I disagree. They deserved it, and I don't regret humiliating my father and brother at all. Update 1, I decided not to reach out to my family to apologize, even though my aunt thinks I was too harsh. I feel no guilt for what I did and have no intention of pretending to regret it, especially in front of them. They had the chance to apologize when they came, but they didn't. I explained this to my aunt, and though she still thinks I shouldn't have acted that way, she doesn't say more. I guess this is one of those cases where we just agree to disagree, and I'm fine with that. Of course, my brother is discussing me behind my back with our school friends, spreading rumors. Unfortunately, we went to the same school, so now different people are messaging me to confirm these rumors, claiming I humiliated and kicked out my father and brother from the restaurant. He exaggerated the story to make himself look like a victim, which isn't surprising at all. Usually, I don't care about such petty rumors, but I don't want potential clients to take them seriously, so I wrote to my brother that if he doesn't stop spreading lies about me in my restaurant, I'll make sure he loses the job he currently has. I hope this works because I have no desire to deal with this nonsense right now. I have too much work, and this is definitely not the right time for these problems. Update 2, my brother replied that he would stop only if I made him a partner. I can't even comprehend the level of idiocy and delusion he lives in. Besides, if he wants to be a partner, doesn't he realize how ridiculous that is? That same restaurant he wants, and I'm sure this is my father's tactic so his favorite son could get a prestigious job without doing anything useful. But unfortunately for them, that won't work on me. I told my brother that if he doesn't stop, he'll be dealing with my lawyers and that he's not in a position to dictate terms to me. The only reason I haven't acted yet is to avoid unnecessary drama, but if he tries anything else, I will definitely crush him. Let him take this as the final warning. I really hope he listens for his own good. Update 3, it's been about a month since the last update. I've been very busy, so I couldn't share what happened next immediately. My brother really stopped trash-talking me behind my back, but they still desperately tried to latch onto my success. A few weeks ago, my father decided to visit me with my brother to intimidate me. They came to my home and threatened to sue me for using my mother's name for my restaurant. They even claimed they had already spoken to a lawyer. If I didn't want trouble, I had to make my brother a partner immediately. Of course, I immediately realized they were bluffing because no sane lawyer would take on such a ridiculous case. Apparently, they forgot one important fact: she was my mother, and as far as I know, there is no law preventing me from using her name. By that point, I was fed up with their nonsense and told them that if they didn't leave me alone, I would call the police. My brother lost it and tried to grab me by the chest, but luckily my father held him back. I guess the constant humiliation finally got to him, and he snapped, but it wasn't my fault, and they were lucky I didn't call the police. Right then, I told my father he needed to get the hell out of here, but he only sent my brother to the car and wanted to talk to me alone. After my brother left, my father tried to manipulate me, saying that if my mother knew what I was doing to them, she would be very disappointed, so I should bury the hatchet. I told him to leave me alone because even I have limits. He couldn't use my mother to get his way. That's just low, and honestly, we've gone too far to talk about reconciliation. Not once during all this did any of them even try to apologize. So I really don't understand why they expected me to forgive them without asking for forgiveness. As for how my mother would feel, I'm sure she would also have been disappointed when my father refused to pay for my education and every time he made me feel worthless. He's the last person who should lecture me on what my mother would have approved of. I know she's proud of me wherever she is, and no words from my father will change that. At least my restaurant is thriving, and hopefully, will expand soon. Write in the comments what you think about this story. My opinion? The author is absolutely right. Personally, I could never stage such a scene in a restaurant. Why? Because I simply wouldn't have the guts. But he spoke his mind and faced them. That's how it should be. He had courage and backbone, he's amazing, and there's absolutely nothing to criticize. Anyway, thank you for watching this video to the end. Check out our previous videos here. Subscribe to our channel because we have many more long stories like this coming. See you next time.